Environmental law works to protect land, air, water, and soil. It consists of a wide variety of legislations, enactments, and provisions that are chiefly concerned with the regulation of human activity which concerns our natural environment and its various interconnected ecosystems. While everything that is encompassed in environmental law may not directly intersect with each other, they all act as a safeguards in preventing environment damage and ensuring effective management of the environment and its multiple ecosystems. Also, environmental law can be said to be a collective term which encompasses aspects of law that provide protection to the environment. A related but distinct set of regulatory regimes, now strongly influenced by environmental legal principles, focuses on the management of specific natural resources such as forests, minerals, or fisheries. Other areas such as environmental impact assessment may not fit neatly into their category but are nonetheless important components of environmental law. It is necessary to combat issues related to environment and conservation of natural resources. For instance, environmental law pertain to issues like global warming, climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, acid rains, hunting of endangered species, deforestation, depletion of natural resources, pollution of water, air and soil. In the US, taking an example, the chief government agency for administering environmental regulations in the Environmental Protection Agency. Also, in most countries, states have their own environmental protection agencies that administer law pertaining to issues to concern to the natural environment and to protect human health. Negligence of these laws and non-applicability of environmental law in some countries is punishes and like fines, community service, and in some extreme cases jail time. Without these environmental laws, the government would not be able to punish those who treat the environment poorly. It should be noted that it has been questioned many times that there is a whether there is a need of environmental laws or not. It should be kept in mind that in the world at large or at a country, they have a population at hand which is increasing at a very high rate, but there are no resources for them just to make them fulfill. And if there is no environmental law, people will start continue cutting forest, cutting trees, and wasting resources such as water and all. So there should be a awareness created for the same, and thereby the environmental law comes into picture. It helps to protect the human health and the environment. The main job of environmental law is to protect human health and it makes a balance between them. The role of the environment is to ensure that the practices used in environment do not cause harm to the environment, human or even animal health. Areas like air quality, water quality, waste management, containment cleanup, chemical safety, resources sustainability come under this law. Therefore, environmental law plays a huge part in protecting humans, animals, habitats, and resources. Although waste management is one of the biggest problems that the world is facing today, it is a very serious problem, and finding efficient and environmental friendly waste management procedure is very important. With proper waste management, it will be easy to protect the environment. Environmental law is to make sure that the process of waste management does not impact the environment or human health badly, and also that waste material is disposed of according to the set standards and procedures. The setting up of industries and manufacturing plants are not possible without the environmental law. The environmental law will make sure that the industries meet all the legal obligations that are required to respect and save our environment. It is the duty of an environmental lawyer to make sure that industries meet all the laws and they are also concerned about the protection of environment. That's where the need of environmental law comes into picture. Also, protecting the environment is a very crucial job. The officers and enforcers who are working to protect them and regulations are made needs to be respected and protected by law and should be given the power to do the job in the most efficient way possible without any interference from any other parties. So environment officer also need to be protected by law so that they can be do the job the best way possible. Now, talking about what constitutes an environmental law, first of all, we need to talk about how we can reduce air pollution and maintaining air quality. It refers that we need measures adopted to maintain safety in our hands. That is, enforcing rules and regulations after determining what is safe level of emission in terms of motor vehicles, industry emissions, and common everyday usage. Second comes the water quality. Water quality laws are primarily concerned with the release of pollutants in various water bodies. Also, water quality law lists various pollutants that must be treated before they are released into water bodies, and also the substance that we have to chemically altered and rendered before disposal. Thirdly comes waste management. Waste management laws regulate the transport, treatment, storage, and disposal of all waste. This include solid municipal waste, hazardous waste, and nuclear waste. In general, waste laws are designed to minimize or regulate the controlled dispersal of waste material into the environment, that is, by minimizing ecological or biological harm. Third comes how we can assure that containment cleanup and there's less damage mitigation. So while preventing future damage to the environment is undeniably the primary objective of the environmental law, and to keep resources intact, we can reduce it by reducing the existing damage is also important. This area basically deals with like toxic leaks and oil spill that happens around the world. The central objective is that to in plan or and also determining the best of investigation, monitoring, and an overall cleanup process. This area concerns itself with the study and assessment of risk in the long term to mitigate any future accident or risk. Then comes chemical safety. The safe use of chemicals also falls under the ambit of environmental law. It primarily concerns itself with the correct storage of chemicals, their use of appropriate safety, and also ensures the legit license and sale of various chemicals, all of which are an integral part of environmental threats that may arise due to poor management. Then, at last but not least, comes sustainability of resources. It can all seen that in recent years the UN has put a great emphasis on ensuring the sustainability of resources. To properly facilitate this vision, it has advocated the formation of various legal principles and legislation. Central to this vision is the concept of environmental impact assessment, and various legislation that come into part will be talked about in the next slide. Thank you. The need for the protection and conservation of environment and sustainable use of natural resources is reflected in the constitutional framework of India and also in the international commitments of India. The Constitution under Part 4A, Article 51A Fundamental Duties casts a duty on every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment including forests, lakes, rivers and wildlife, and to compassion for living creatures. Further, the Constitution of India under Part 4, Article 48A of DPSP stipulates that states shall endeavour to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forest and wildlife of the country. Many important legislation like the NGT Act 2010, Environment Protection Act 1986, Wildlife Protection Act, and many more which will be covered by my other counterpart in the next slides. Also, the international convention signed by on environment law, like the Ramsar Convention, which led to a starting in 1971, which initiated the push for a greater conservation and sustainable use of wetlands. Also, it encouraged for in 1972 in the Stockholm Conference, which was the first major environmental conference, and set the framework for discussion on environment and the need of some form of regulation which needs to be there. Also, the Stockholm Declaration, with its 26 principles, was formulated at this conference itself. It marked as the creation of the UN Environment Program. Then, in 1980, Vienna Convention, which was established to ensure that steps to be taken to preserve and protect the ozone layer. Last but not the least, the Kyoto Protocol, which was signed in 1997, it was based on the idea of common but differentiated responsibilities. It placed higher responsibility on the developed countries to reduce emissions as they bore primary responsibility for the high level of emissions, and on the developing country to make sure that there is proper use of the environment resources. That's all.
Protection Act 1972. Today's world is full of new technologies, buildings, machinery, offices. We are moving ahead with modernization, but we are lacking behind with the nature. Many of the species are already extinct, and many of them are going to be extinct. Hunting and eating of wild animals has also led to this. It is very much necessary to understand the need of our and to protect the wildlife. In order to protect them, many steps can be taken by the government as well as by the people. Now, what is wildlife? Wildlife means any animals, plants, insects, fishes, butterflies, etc., which are usually found in forest. And now, what is Wildlife Protection Act? 1972 is an act of Parliament of India enacted for protection of listed species of flora and fauna, established a network of ecologically important protected areas. It empowered the central and state government to declare any area a wildlife sanctuary or a national park. So it extends to whole of India. Prior to the legislation, India had only five designated national parks. At present, there are 101 national parks in India. Now, constitutional provision for wildlife. This 42nd Amendment Act, Article 51 AG, Article 48 AA. So, 42nd Amendment Act 1976, Forest and Protection of Wild Animals and Birds was transferred from state to concurrent list. In Article 51 AG of the Constitution states that it shall be the duty of every fundamental duty of every citizen to protect and improve the natural environment, including forest and wildlife. Article 48A in Directives Principle of State Policy DPSP mandates that the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forest and wildlife of the country. Now, there is a Wildlife Advisory Board. The board mainly constituted to advise the state government in the following matters. Number one, selection of areas to be declared as sanctuaries, national parks, and closed area, and the administration thereof. Number two, in formulation of the policy for protection and conservation of wildlife and the specified plants. Schedules of Wildlife Protection Act. There are six schedules in the Act. Schedule 1, it covers endangered species that need rigorous protection. These species are granted protection from poaching, trading, killing, etc. Animals like black buck, Bengal tiger. Schedule 2. Animals under this act are also accorded high protection with the prohibition on their uh, trade. They cannot be hunted except under threat to human life or if they are suffering from a disease disorder that goes beyond recovery. For example, Himalayan black bear. Schedule 3 and 4. Species that are not endangered are included under Schedule 3 and 4. This includes protected species with hunting prohibited, but the penalty for any violation is less compared to the first two schedules, for example, Nilgai. Schedule 5. This schedule contains animals that are considered as vermin, small wild animals that carry diseases and destroy plants and food. These animals can be hunted. It includes only four species of wild animals: common crows, fruit bats, mice, rats. Schedule 6, it provides for regulation in cultivation of a specified plant and restricts its possession and sale and transportation. Both cultivation and trade of specified plants can only be carried out with prior permission of competent authority. Plants protected under Schedule 6 includes blue orchid, red orchid. Now, features. Prohibition of hunting. It prohibits the hunting of any wild animal specified in Schedule 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Act. Exception is there. A wild animal listed under the schedules can be hunted, killed, or only after getting permission from a chief wildlife warden of the state if it becomes dangerous to human life or property, including standing crops on any land. Second, it is disabled or suffering from a disease that is beyond recovery. Now, second, prohibition of cutting, uprooting specified plants. It prohibits the uprooting, damage, collection, possession, or selling of any specified plant from any forest land or any protected areas. There is also an exception. The CWLW, however, may grant permission for uprooting or collecting a specific plant for the purpose of education, scientific research, preservation in a herbarium, or if a person institution is approved to do so by the central government. 3.3, cooking or serving meat of wild animals in any eating house is illegal without a license. State government may by notification declare its intention to constitute any area other than area comprised with any reserve forest. Now there are many following activities are prohibited are in the national parks, that are destroying, exploring, or removing any wildlife, or destroying, damaging the habitat of any wild animal, deprive any wild animal of its habitat, or grazing of any livestock. So the term trophy means the whole or any part of any captive animal or wild animal other than vermin, for example, feather, nail, tooth, eggs. Every wild animal or trophy other than vermin which is hunted or kept or bred in captivity or found dead or killed by mistake shall be the property of the state government. If any of the above is found in the sanctuary or a national park declared by the central government, it shall be the property of central government. Offences committed in relation to any animal specified in Schedule 1 or 2 shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term less than 1 year, extend to 6 years, or with fine or less than 5,000 rupees. Human wildlife conflict generally includes monkey events like monkey menace in urban areas, crop destruction by wild pigs and ilgai, destruction caused by wild elephant and killing by tigers. So the common reasons for such conflicts are reduced in number of prey for carnivores, encroachment in forest areas, ever expanding agricultural land demand. WP Act 1972 Act itself as it prevents killing until it's declared vermin. So there are steps which are taken by government, eco development activities around protected areas. It engages local community in the protection process. New training modules and technical equipment for staff and forest personnel. Declaration of some animals as vermin, hence allowing its killing. National Tiger Conservation Authority has ordered to remove tribal under FRA 2006 in critical tiger habitat. In 1991, the Wildlife Act was further amended. This amendment was made on the basis of recommendation of Indian Wildlife Board and Ministry of Environment and Forest. So, in 1991 Amendment Act, hunting of all wild animals except vermin such was prohibited, but in certain exceptional circumstances, such as for protection of life and property, for education, for research, scientific management, and captive breeding, hunting of wild animals was permitted. So there is a case R. Simon versus Union of India, in which the facts are like the petitioner, who was the manufacturer of coats, caps, gloves, blankets, and snack skin items like bags, shoes. So, and briefcase challenged 1991 amendment, which prohibited trade in animal articles. It was contended by the said act that is colorable legislation, as it indirectly takes away fundamental right to carry on any trade or business under Article 19(1)(g), so which cannot be done directly. So while rejecting, High Court held that every animal is important in maintaining the ecological balance, and it's duty of every citizen to protect and improve the wildlife in the country. So the Supreme Court, so there is no fundamental right is absolute, and the same can be restricted in public interest. So the Supreme Court upheld that the Supreme Court in this case upheld that the constitutional validity of this amendment under Article 19(6). The court observed that a trade which is dangerous to ecology may be regulated or may be regulated totally prohibited, balancing the social interest and the fundamental rights. A total prohibition is reasonable. So there is also a case where Tarun Bharat Sangh Alwar versus Union of India. So the facts was the petitioner organization challenged the grant of 215 mining licenses in the area declared as a tiger reserve in Alwar district of Rajasthan. So the Supreme Court cancelled all the licenses as they were given in the tiger reserve area. So the conclusion was that the legislation and the judiciary in our country are both aware of the significance of the wildlife. So, with constantly shrinking forest cover, the survival of wildlife has been jeopardized. Still, we have to do our best to protect the wildlife. And conviction of Salman Khan by Jodhpur court for killing a black buck has sent a clear signal about the commitment of lower judiciary also for protection of the wildlife in our country. It is also proved that in our country nobody is above the law, and we have to save our wildlife. Thank you.
The Environment Protection Act of 1986 establishes a critical framework for studying, planning, and implementing long term requirements for environmental safety and lays down a system of adequate and speedy responses to situations threatening the environment. It is under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. It is officially considered to be an umbrella legislation to regulate the environment deterioration and pollution. It was made in the light of the Bhopal gas tragedy or the Bhopal disaster. The act is also directly linked to the commitments India made in the United Nations Conference on Human Behavior held at Stockholm in June 1972. The act is applicable to the whole of India. Act or the EP Acta. The first and foremost salient feature is the definition that it gave to the term environment. The term environment was efficiently defined under Section 2A of the Act as follows. Environment includes air, water, and land, and the relationship that exists amongst and between air, water, and land and other human beings, living creatures, plants, animals, microorganisms, and property. Now, the second important salient feature is the empowering of the central government. The central government was vested with the job of protecting the nation's environment as a whole. So, they were empowered to plan and execute nationwide programs for prevention, control, and abatement of environmental pollution, to lay down standards for the quality of environment in various aspects. They also had the power of entry and inspection to check the compliance with all the orders and notices that were put forward by the Act. The third salient feature is the restriction laid on pollutant discharge. The Act does not permit any person to discharge or emit or permit the discharge or emission of environmental pollutants in excess. The Act also allowed the central government to establish environmental laboratories for the purpose of research and assessment of pollutants which deteriorated the environment. Another salient feature is the appointment of a government analyst in such laboratories. A government analyst could be appointed in the laboratories to survey and analyze the samples of air, water, or any other substances that were brought before him through the laboratory. Now, there were very many rules that were laid down by the Act. For the purpose of critical following of such rules, there were penalties that were implemented. If there is any kind of distortion from the rules laid down by the Act, a penalty fee of 1 lakh rupees or an imprisonment of 5 years was to be implemented on the person or both. If such an offence is committed again, he will be responsible to pay a rupees 5,000 per day till he is convicted for it. And if this offence continues for a period of more than 1 year from the date of conviction, he will be entitled to an imprisonment which may extend to 7 years. Last but not the least, the most important salient feature of the Act is the cognizance of offence. No court shall take cognizance of the offences under this Act until a complaint is made by the central government or any such authority on behalf of the former, or by a person who has received a 60-day notice which has been furnished by the central government or any such authority. These are the salient features of the Act. Now, moving now let us see what are the drawbacks of the Act. Even though the Act aimed at protecting the environment of the nation as a whole, there were many drawbacks which led to the failure of the Act. One such drawback is the centralization of powers. The Act levied a huge amount of powers on the central government, which led to their misuse of these powers, and they also took a more arbitrary in nature, thus neglecting the environment. Another important drawback is the lack of public participation. The Act made no provision that helped the public take their own stand in helping and protecting the environment. A major drawback which also led to the failure of the Act is the incomplete coverage of pollutants. The Act did not address the problem of modern concepts of pollutants, which included noise, overburdened traffic, and radiation waves. They all together led to the failure of the Environment Protection Act of 1986.
Hello everyone. My topic for the presentation is National Green Tribunal Act 2010. The National Green Tribunal Act is a specialized body set up under the National Green Tribunal Act 2010 for the speedy disposal of civil cases that are related to environmental protection, conservation of forest and other natural resources. It consists of 38 sections, 5 chapters and 3 schedules. With the establishment of NGT, India became the third country in the world to set up a specialized environmental tribunal after Australia and New Zealand. The National Green Tribunal has 5 places of sitting. New Delhi is the principal place of sitting and Bhopal, Pune, Kolkata and Chennai are the 4 other. Features of National Green Tribunal Act. The National Green Tribunal Act shall be guided by the principle of natural justice. The tribunal has original and appellate jurisdiction concerning the implementation of 7 environmental laws such as Environmental Protection Act, the Wildlife Protection Act, etc. The National Green Tribunal will apply principles of sustainable development, precautionary principle, polluter pay principle while passing any order. There is no limit in granting compensation for the victims under National Green Tribunal. The compensation ordered by the tribunal shall be credited to Environmental Relief Fund 2008. Any person aggrieved by the decision of the tribunal shall move to Supreme Court. Any person fails to comply with the order of the tribunal shall be punishable with imprisonment or fine. Objectives: the speedy and effective disposal of all the cases related to environmental protection and other natural resources. All the previous pending cases will also be decided by the tribunal. Its main aim is to legally enforce all the rights relating to the environment. It accounts for providing compensation and justice to all the affected people in case of any damage. Establishment and composition of National Green Tribunal. Section 3rd of National Green Tribunal Act 2010 deals with the establishment of the tribunal. Section 4 of the Act deals with the composition of the tribunal. It consists of a full-time chairperson, judicial members not less than 10 and maximum up to 20 members. Expert members are not less than 10 and maximum up to 20 members. A chairperson can invite 1 or 2 specialized body who know in a particular case. The central government can notify the territorial jurisdiction under the place of sitting. Qualification and appointment of the members. Section 5 deals with the qualification and appointment of the chairperson, judicial members and expert member. The chairperson or the judicial member of the tribunal who is or has been a judge of Supreme Court of India or Chief Justice of High Court. For judicial members, they can also be the judges of High Court. Expert member has Master of Science, Master of Engineering or Master of Technology. and has an experience of 15 years in a relevant field, including 5 years practical experience in the field of environment and forest in the reputed national level institution. The chairperson, judicial member, and expert member of the tribunal shall not hold any office during the tenure as such. Term of the office is given under Section 7 of the Act. The members of the tribunal can hold office for 5 years term from the date of the joining and are not eligible for reappointment. In case a judge of the Supreme Court has been appointed as a chairperson or judicial members, their term period is up to attaining 70 years of age. In case a Chief Justice of the High Court has been appointed as a chairperson or judicial members, their term period is up to attaining 60 years of age. In case a High Court judge is appointed as a judicial member, his term period is up to attaining 60 years of age. Expert members shall hold office till he attains the age of 65 years age. Removal and suspension of the chairperson, judicial members and expert members are given under Section 10 of the Act. With the consultation of the Chief Justice of India, the central government can remove the chairperson or the judicial member of the tribunal who has been adjudged as insolvent, has been convicted for an offence involves moral turpitude, has become physically or mentally incapable, acted prejudicially in his functions, abused his position to render his continuance in office prejudicial to the public interest. The expert member can be removed from the office by the central government on the same grounds. Jurisdiction of the tribunal, Section 14. The tribunal shall have the jurisdiction to deal with the civil cases where the substantial question relating to the environment is involved and settle such disputes and pass on orders and decisions thereon. Section 16 states that if any party who is not satisfied with the orders or the decision of the tribunal can prefer to appeal to the tribunal within 30 days of the order passed. If the aggrieved party is prevented by certain cause and the tribunal is satisfied by it, then it may allow the application to be filed within the further period exceeding 60 days. Powers and procedures of the tribunal is given under Section 19 of the Act. The tribunal shall not be bound by the Civil Procedure Code or Indian Evidence Act. The tribunal has the power to regulate its own procedure. The tribunal is vested with the powers of civil court in trying the suit as prescribed under CPC, summoning and enforcing the attendance of any person and examining him on oath, requiring the discovery and production of documents, receiving evidence on affidavits, issuing commissions for the examination of witness or documents, reviewing its decision. And Section 20 states that the tribunal, while passing any order or decision, has to apply the principle of sustainable development, the precautionary principle, and the polluter pay principles. Who can approach to the National Green Tribunal? According to NGT Act, an aggrieved person can file a case before the tribunal and could be an individual, a company, a firm, an association of persons, even if not registered or incorporated, a trustee, a local authority, or a government body. The person need not to be directly affected by the project or development in question, but could be any person who is interested in protecting and preserving the environment. There is a time period within which the case has to be brought before the tribunal, which varies according to the type of case. Appeal to the Supreme Court is given under Section 21. If any person is aggrieved with the order that was given by the tribunal, he may file an appeal to the Supreme Court within 90 days of the order passed by the tribunal. The Supreme Court shall also entertain the application after the expiration of 90 days if it satisfied with the reason that prevented the applicant to file before the Supreme Court. Penalty is given under Section 26 of the Act. Any persons who fail to comply with the decision of the tribunal shall be punishable with the imprisonment of a term which may extend to 3 years, fine, or which may extend to 10 crore rupees or both. In case of companies, the fine may extend to 25 crore rupees. The National Green Tribunal is a welcoming concept where there are huge environmental related cases that have been raised in every part of society, where it has to be addressed and clear there and the for the sustainable development of the environment. Hence, the tribunal plays a significant role in protecting the environment. The tribunal has to be monitored periodically to attain the objective of environmental conservation.